coming up later in the podcast.
I have to say what you said. Anybody who says that this film is not a worthy successor or isn't
fucking
awesome,
Philistine.
they're just wrong. They're just wrong.
Yeah, simple as. I've been saying this for years, and I'll be saying it for years fucking more.
My interpretation of the Merovingian's character is that he is the personification of atheism.
I have an awful horn for the whole religious symbolism going on in it. I love that shit.
Hello everybody, you are listening to the Magic Skeptic, aka Magic Dara, and you are all most welcome to another episode of A Magician's Thoughts. I must admit, a very special episode today as we have returning guests, albeit it might just be best to call him a frequent contributor at this point. And that is PJ from the absolutely awesome channel Just The Tipp. PJ, I must say it's absolutely brilliant to have you back on the channel again today.
Thanks, lad. It's wonderful to be back.
I always sense that you find these little kind of introductions a bit awkward or something. I must admit, it's not the most... it's a weird way of communicating or something, isn't it? This kind of like you have to adopt this presenter personality that isn't really you, you know?
Yeah, whereas you see, I generally don't. I just kind of like fuck it and just plow on, you know? I just don't have that bit of the brain that kind of, I don't know, no showmanship, I suppose. It's just, there you go. That's what you see is what you get kind of job. If you don't like it, fuck off and play in the traffic.
Yeah, we've very different backgrounds in that regard. My magic background, and I mean, I've spent a lot of time on stage and theatricality and deception and all that kind of stuff. Oh,
your magic background, all those years you attended Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry.
That's funny actually, because people would always say to me, you know, why don't you go and like do magic as a career or something? And I always say I didn't get enough points in the Leaving Cert to get into Hogwarts. Do you remember that time when we we were doing I think it was a short film the short film you'd written, and when we were having a break on set, I was doing magic and there was that girl.
Oh, yeah.
You remember that? I showed her a magic trick and she was like, oh, is that real?
Is that real magic? And I just looked and was like, yes.
I'll never forget the way you spoke to her. It was the most dismissive, condescending thing I'd ever seen in my life, but it was just played off perfectly. You looked her dead in the eye and you said, what would you have said if he told you it was real magic?
Would you just like have accepted that on face value and went, oh, grand, there is actually magic in the world. Excellent. Now, in fairness, I'd love to believe that too, because reality on reality's terms is a bit fucking shite. So, you know, part of me is kind of, maybe that's why I was such a fucking condescending bollocks, is because, you know, I envy someone that can be that kind of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed about life, I suppose. Where, you know...
There's definitely something enviable about it. I know exactly what you mean.
Absolutely. Like, do you remember how great things were? Like, when you thought there was a Santa and all this stuff.
Yeah,
some big fat bastard that'd come down the chimney with a load of presents for you once a year. Excellent.
Yeah. Some big lovable fat fella who's very charitable, like.
Yeah. Where in reality, it's probably, I don't know, fat uncle or something coming in to molest you. That's,
oh my God.
You know, that's reality as opposed to fantasy.
Merry Christmas. Oh, I don't know if I'm going to have to bleep that out. Jesus Christ, this got heavy very, very quickly. Oh my God. Anyway, the reason PJ is actually here today is to discuss The Matrix. Moving on from sexual assault, folks. Cheery though it is.
Yeah.
But no, seriously, guys, this is part 2 of a conversation. So if you have not seen PJ and I's first conversation about The Matrix, what we did is, to the best of our ability, given our knowledge and being major fans of the film, we deconstructed the first Matrix. And we spoke about what it says to us, how the film speaks to us, what its message is, what is it driving at, And I really enjoyed that conversation, and PJ enjoyed it so much that we agreed to do the trilogy of films. And so this is the second conversation. And so if you're familiar with the trilogy, you'll know that we're going to discuss The Matrix Reloaded today. And it couldn't be a better time, really, because the trailer for the new one just dropped the other day, The Matrix Resurrections. PJ, before we go any further, it would just be remiss of me not to ask you your opinion. What did you think of the trailer, my friend?
For the most part, I liked it, but Hollywood has taught me to be fucking cautious with regards to getting my hopes up about anything, especially Hollywood of the present day anyway. So I'm cautiously optimistic. They've got a lot of stuff going on there that looks very interesting, but it's all going to, when the movie actually shows its hand and the explanations given for a lot of things that they've, teased in the trailer, the actual explanations for those things on paper might be fucking cat. The Wachowski siblings haven't made good movies outside of The Matrix. They haven't.
I couldn't agree more.
So
Cloud Atlas and what was it, Jupiter Ascending or something?
Yeah, isn't that regarded by many to be one of the worst films ever made, bar none?
They haven't done great work, have they?
No. Well, many would say that that their one achievement was the first Matrix, where I absolutely and totally oppose that point of view. The Matrix Reloaded is fucking class, and I have a place in my heart for the third one as well. I'll properly defend Reloaded, whereas I'm a bit more okay with the criticisms level towards the third one, but by and large, I just love them all.
Yeah, it's a sliding scale, isn't it? The first one is quite obviously, and I think by popular consensus, it is a masterpiece.
It's objectively the best of them. There can be no argument there. I don't think. You could still say like I do. Reloaded is my favorite one, but I couldn't look someone in the eye and say, but it's a better film than the first one. As a movie, whatever about script or theme, just even the way it's shot, and even the action scenes in the first one, every punch in the first movie has weight to it that's absent from the fight scenes in Reloaded and Revolutions. Is it? Yeah, Revolutions. A lot of the fight choreographing in the sequels, it looks very kind of dance where okay, your fist goes here, then my hand goes here to block it, kind of thing, and it looks very rehearsed. Whereas in the first one, when the lads were fucking decking each other, you were like, oh Jesus, there was proper clout to it, and it was kind of shot in such a way that you felt everything, and it was much more visceral. Whereas the third ones the second and third movie are very they're very set piecey and kind of dancey or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a sliding scale. The first one is a masterpiece. The second one is very good, and the third one is just good. And that's how I view it as well. It sounds like we're on the same page there. Yeah. I guess all I'd say is that greatness is rare. That's what makes great films so great. There's not that many of them, and the first one is obviously great. The others are not great, but as you said, and I agree entirely, I will defend the trilogy till the end of my time. And speaking of fights and choreography, the second one has a lot, but the third one, if I'm remembering it correctly, only actually has one martial arts fight, and that is the final battle between Neo and Agent Smith. The rest of that third film is set in the, quote, real world, and it's about Neo making his way to the Machine City and the subplot with Agent Smith having gotten out of the Matrix and all that business. But I guess that's a conversation for another day, perhaps.
Yeah, you're right. The martial arts and all that is at a minimum in that movie. It's predominantly the war in Zion. I think there is another action set piece towards the start of it where they have that kind of lobby scene going into the Merovingians' lair.
That's right, and it's quite poor. It's actually quite poor. It's not a great sequence in my estimation, but
no, it's not. When you compare it to the sequence that's quite similar to it in the first movie.
Yes.
And then, it's like, okay, this one was done like 4 years later. You're like, all right, well, you did it fucking way better 4 years ago.
Yeah, what the hell is going on? You're disimproving with time. But I have to give you my thoughts on the trailer.
Yeah.
I liked the trailer. I have to admit I liked it, but I'm very concerned about a couple of things. So, first of all, there's no real fight choreography shown in the trailer. Now, I know the trailer is arguably a teaser, and so they don't want to blow their load too early. They show one or two quick shots of fighting, and what I saw in those one or two quick shots did not inspire confidence. There's a moment where young Morpheus, it would seem, played by that actor whose name I'm never going to be able to commit to memory because it's a very unusual name, but he throws a fist and who I believe to be Neo, certainly Keanu Reeves, whether or not it is Neo is arguably a mystery of the film because Neo died, I think. But
yeah, there's something going on there as well. Like at one point, Neo looks into the looking glass or the mirror, the same one. Man.
Yes.
Yeah, and this other reflection, like where his face is, starts looking back at him for a moment.
Right. That's right.
So there's something going on there in terms of who's who, anyway.
For sure, but just to get to the key point that I was going to make, when Morpheus throws the fist at Neo, again, let's use all these names tentatively because we don't know. The way Neo catches the fist looks really hammy. Now, maybe it's just bad editing in the trailer. It looks like that slow choreography, but even worse than The Matrix Reloaded. It looks like, oh no, Keanu Reeves is an old man. But then, like an old man in real life. But I can't say that because if you've seen the John Wick films, now whether you like them or not is a separate question, but what shines through, in my view, with considerable clarity when you watch the John Wick films is that Keanu Reeves still has it. I mean, he's an incredible physical performer. He's amazing. So, look, the choreography or what little of it we see in the trailer concerned me. I'm very worried, like you are, about what the potential explanation for all of this nonsense is, because we know Trinity is dead. We know Neo is supposed to be dead. Why the fuck is Morpheus a young guy all of a sudden again? It's all very strange, and I don't know exactly what's going on, and I don't think now is the time or the place to theorize. But while I like the trailer, all I can say is that I'm cautiously, extremely, I guess, cautiously optimistic, because I want it to be great. I want it to be a return to form for the Wachowskis, albeit I think it's just Lana Wachowski is directing this one.
That's right, yeah.
But whatever the case, I want it to be great because I love The Matrix. And yeah, I guess we'll see. Greatness is rare. Hopefully this is one of the rare ones, right?
Yeah. Well, it's always better, that there are good things that you can avail of out there as opposed to shit things. So yeah, yes. I too hope it's great. But from what I've heard, it's meant to be fairly meta, which I think is the right direction to go with it, because the plot, other than that, is fairly well resolved. I think there's not really really anywhere to go unless you want to retread old water, because the third movie ends and we've resolved the war with the machines. There's peace now, so the only real place you can go with that is war broke out again.
That's going to be difficult to justify, isn't it? But
kind of like fucking Star Wars. Actually, when Star Wars came back with Episode 7, it's like but I thought you defeated the Empire. Oh, we did. No, but now the First Order are here. Who are they? Doesn't matter. Let's just go on.
think a better example, actually, if you forgive me for saying so, is Terminator 2. They keep trying to do a sequel to Terminator 2, and the reason it largely doesn't work is because Terminator 2 so satisfactorily resolved the entire narrative.
Yeah. Every single arc was paid off. Every thread that was left dangling, had been tugged, and everything was done. Like, you were left wanting for nothing at the end of it. There was literally no reason to ever, like, to revisit that story and that timeline. You could only damage it because it was just done to perfection. Yeah, never has there been a better conclusion to anything.
Terminator 3's answer to continue it was, you only postponed it. Yeah. I'll never forget when Arnold Schwarzenegger's T-850 in that film, it was the T-850, not the T-800. I'll never forget when he says that, Nick Steil, who took up the mantle of John Connor in that film, says, "I thought we stopped Judgment Day," and he says, "Oh, you only postponed it." That was cringeworthy in and of itself. Terminator Salvation tried to continue it by, admittedly, a somewhat novel route. It's almost like a prequel in a sense.
They just explored the
Kyle
happenings
Reese.
in the future.
Yeah, which is awesome. That was a good idea.
Yeah, it was by far it's by a moon mile. It's the best of the sequels, in my opinion, anyway.
I agree with that. Actually, I really like Terminator Salvation. It gets a lot of hate, but I actually really liked it, and I think it does do a good job of plugging that gap and telling Kyle Reese's story in the future war with the machines. But it certainly has massive problems. The climax with the CGI Arnold and all that. Oh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Not desirable, but
I can live with visual problems more so than I can with problems with the writing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, because in principle it wasn't a bad idea to have Arnold there, but you should have just got Arnold. How awesome would that have been if they had gotten actual Arnold Schwarzenegger? But at that time, wasn't he pussyfooting about it being governor of California or something?
Oh, that's that's it.
Yeah.
And then when he came back to reprise the role, it was for fucking two absolutely septic films.
Genesis and Dark Fate. Yeah, they're both fairly rotten now, admittedly. And you know what? I'm not going to even discuss how they tried to continue the story. In a phrase, Genesis tries to do it by fucking with the timeline, and they make a bollocks of it. And Dark Fate tries to do it by just forgetting all the other films exist, and they made a bollocks of it. So, yeah, it's when a film has a satisfactory conclusion, it's very difficult to open that book again. And that's what I worry is going to happen with The Matrix Resurrections. Even the title is suggestive that they're reopening something that should be dead. And that doesn't give me confidence. That makes me very concerned. And so, look, watch this space, I guess, PJ. But for now, let's get to the matter at hand. Do you like Matrix Reloaded? Yes, you do. But what does it say to you, PJ? Where would you like to start?
Well, right, we'll just get it out of the way. So the movie, first and foremost, is about determinism versus free will. That's the main theme insofar as what I can see. And, that's kind of a motif that's kind of there throughout all three movies.
Yep. And just to be clear, just interject for one moment, PJ, just so people understand exactly what we're talking about. Determinism being the idea that there is no free will, that every single event is determined by the laws of physics, basically. So what we have is the illusory feeling that we're free, but everything we're going to do is actually determined because there is no freedom.
Yeah,
we are physical beings with physical brains that are subject to the laws of physics that are entirely deterministic. That is what determinism is, versus the free will idea, which, as you pointed out, is a central theme of the film. So are we really free to do what we want? I think it's best typified by the conversation that Neo has with the Oracle, which we'll get to. But I just wanted to give that interjection just so that the audience, I don't want to assume too little or too much. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page and that everybody understands in this conversation what we're talking about when we say free will versus determinism. So do we have free choices, or is it all just determined by the laws of physics or some other phenomena? Is that a fair summary of those two positions, PJ?
It is, yes. Just as well to clarify for any of the ticks in the audience. So now you got absolutely no.
So now that the fucking Egypts are caught up, PJ. Oh, that's why I love you, PJ. You're great. Anyway, look at me trying to be, diplomatic and making sure we're all on the same page, and PJ just being a tyrant. There you go.
Yeah. Like, actually, now that I come to think of it, if there are any ticks listening to this, like, would you not just go and watch the match or something? I'm sure there's a match on, because there's always a fucking match on.
I'm sure there's a ball to kick around there somewhere. I think PJ and I just showed our anti-sports bias.
Yeah, well, I'll only not I'm just going to speak for myself here, but my absolute contempt of it. But anyways.
Sorry, PJ, go ahead. So the central theme of the second film is free will versus determinism. Go for it, my friend.
Yeah, but in the case of The Matrix Reloaded, two things pop to mind that I absolutely adore it for, and reasons why I think it's fantastic and why I always will defend the film until my dying breath. It works as a perfect deconstruction of the first movie, and it really examines the whole faith versus rationalism thing, and that's kind of echoed throughout the movie. And it even, like, say, the first movie, it's very much Morpheus is presented as this infallible purveyor of truth, and he's unshackling Neo from the chains of deception that's been, that the machines have him all caught up in and shit. And he's seen as this liberator and this guy who, he's on this path of the faithful, and it's evidently the right road. And at the end of the movie, we have that whole kind of, he's beginning to believe, and then we see him, he gets his superpowers and he can fly now, and he kind of becomes the Christ figure. The second movie then completely deconstructs all of that, and like throughout the entire movie, you're basically seeing everything that was laid down about the world in the first movie overturned on its head. Because as soon as we get back to Zion and we see more of the people who live in Zion and all that jazz, we see that like Morpheus isn't seen as this infallible leader, but he's seen by as many people as being a lunatic and a fanatic nutjob who, we should just kind of, just let whatever, Morpheus, you do you. We're just going to try and survive. But there's as many people think he's a nutter as actually believe in the thing that he believes. But thankfully, his beliefs don't require anyone to believe. So
yes, that's one of the best lines, isn't it? Where it's Commander Locke who says to Morpheus something like, "Damn it, Morpheus! I don't care. Not everybody believes as you believe."
Messiahs. Yeah.
And not everybody believes as you believe. And then Morpheus responds and says, "My beliefs don't require them to, or don't require you to believe as I believe." That brings me to a note that I wrote down while watching it, actually. And I must say, I love the character of Commander Locke, because Commander Locke is the personification of skepticism in the film.
Yes, precisely.
He is the one.
He's the yin to Morpheus's yang, essentially.
Absolutely. And in one sense, I don't know how you'll react to this, but I feel like the film presents Commander Locke as the antagonist. It feels like Commander Locke is the bad guy because we've been essentially molded to love Morpheus from the first film.
Well, yeah, but when you start the movie, you have a prior relationship with the character of Morpheus where you don't Locke. And now he comes out of the woodwork and he's like opposing Morpheus straight away. So therefore, he can't but be viewed as the bad guy.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is that Commander Locke is right in the end.
He's actually correct,
He's actually correct. Morpheus is wrong about the prophecy. There is no prophecy. The prophecy is bullshit. It was just another means of control. So just, again, I can't imagine anybody is listening to this podcast who hasn't seen the film, but just for my own edification and just to get it straight in my head, and PJ, I want to run this by you because there's a lot in this film. There's a lot to unpack, and I want to make sure, especially talking to another mega fan of the film like you, I want to make sure that I've gotten this correct. So my understanding of the film, so the first one sets up the prophecy that if we find the one is going to lead us to salvation, hence the Christ comparison, right? The one is going to
those machines.
Exactly. He'll help us. He's the John Connor, if you will, of this universe, right? He's going to help us defeat the machines and lead us to glorious victory. Sure enough, they find the one who will be identified by his unbelievable powers and ability to break the rules of the Matrix, which, of course, Neo ends up being able to do. And so he's the one. Happy days. We found our one. Now it's only a matter of time, as Morpheus puts it, before the prophecy is fulfilled and the machines will never reach the city of Zion and human beings will survive and it's all hunky-dory in the garden. Fantastic. It turns out, and what the second film reveals, hence PJ's, I would say, articulate and beautiful explanation of it, that the machines are... It's just another system of control. The machines have given humanity a religion. They've given humanity this nonsense that there is a one, because they counted on a certain number of humans rejecting the program. So a certain number of humans are not going to readily accept the Matrix program. They're going to wake up. And then that's a problem for the machines. So rather than kill all those humans, because that would be a very difficult task, what they do, relying on our innate irrationality and emotionality, they give us hope. They give us irrationality in the form of a faith that there is going to be a savior who will save us from the machines. And that, of course, then animates the human beings in the, quote, real world around this prophecy, Morpheus and his crew, the Nebuchadnezzar and all the other believers. And that keeps the humans busy spending time on a lie, spending their days trying to make a prophecy comes true that is a folly. And that is what the second film reveals. Is that a fair summary of what actually happens, PJ?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Like, here, look, have this nonsense to occupy yourself until such a time where there's enough of you that you could potentially cause some kind of problem, at which point we'll send a whack of fucking squids down there to kill you.
Yes. And it is Commander Locke that typifies the resistance to this faith. As you quite rightly point out, PJ, the second film reveals that not everybody is just hook, line, and sinker on the Morpheus train.
Yeah.
There are human beings who resisted. Even the character, and I've written some notes about him here. There's I've forgotten his name, unfortunately, but he's the elderly gentleman who has the conversation with Neo down in the...
Counselor Hammond.
Thank you. He has the conversation with him down in the machine deck where they keep all their utilities and water processing plant and all the rest of it. Yeah. Even he is not entirely sold on Neo's abilities and the prophecy of the one at the beginning of the film. Now, he becomes, I think it's fair to say, he becomes a believer. But you're absolutely right, PJ, when you say that the second film pulls back the curtain a little bit and reveals that, not everybody is on board the Morpheus train and not everybody is convinced by his faithful presupposition that it's all going to work out in the end.
Yeah, even say the character of Link, who is the new operator on board the ship, once he meets his girlfriend, wife, partner, I'm not sure, they don't ever make that clear, but his romantic interest anyway.
Yes.
Z, I think, is the character's name. But she basically voices concern for Link because she looks at Link and she's like, I lost two brothers to that ship, and now you've joined that same ship, and you're wondering why I'm worried. And he's basically says, like, I know I'm paraphrasing the shit out of this, but he basically says, there's no need to worry because Morpheus told me about the prophecy, and it's all going to be sorted. And her response to it is basically one of like, oh shit, my boyfriend's after buying into this lunatic's cult, and that's basically it. But you, as the viewer, have also been hoodwinked by the events of the first movie. So you're in that cult with Link, and you're there like fucking like, yeah, Link is right. You know, you're just naysaying, you know, what's going to happen. We've all seen Neo get his powers and that, so of course, yeah.
Oh my God, PJ, you're so right. That you just made the hair stand up on my arm. You're absolutely right. The first film is our indoctrination as viewers.
Yeah.
Oh man,
yeah.
Oh, now that I've said that out loud, the first film is our faith school.
Yep.
It's our primary school education in Ireland with Jesus being jammed down our throat, essentially.
Yep.
That's what the first film is. And then the second film, when we encounter the naysayers like Link's romantic interest or Commander Locke and so forth, when these people who doubt it crop up, we're like, you're the bad guys.
We instinctually go, oh, he hears the mean-spirited non-believers.
Yes. Oh my God, PJ, you're so... I have to say what you said. Anybody who says that this film is not a worthy successor or isn't
fucking Philistine,
they're just wrong. They're just wrong.
Yeah, simple as. I've been saying this for years, and I'll be saying it for years fucking more.
It's a guy who comes up in Ducky's videos quite frequently, who we all know personally, Hef. It would be remiss of me not to give Hef a shout out. I hope Hef listens to this. And Hef,
he won't be listening. He's way too busy with kids and all that jazz. And way
too busy with believing.
So feel free to cut the back off and call him for fucking shit-eating Philistine that he is. But yeah, he's
PJ,
been
weren't you the best man at his wedding?
I was, yeah, and I brought up this Matrix debate in his best man speech. It was fucking brilliant.
Guys, that's how deep this goes. How deep this goes. PJ mentioned the disagreement between Hef and himself on the Matrix Reloaded in his best man speech.
Yeah. So basically, during the bit where I was going on about
PJ, respect. I would have done it as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm like, oh, did you think I wouldn't go here? You go, oh, Christ, my sweet summer child. But
that's hilarious. That's commitment right there. Respect.
When I was going on about basically like, oh, I've known Hef, forever and a day. I can remember, way back when we were after seeing the Matrix Reloaded, and he thought it was shite, and I've been fucking. I've been trying to correct him ever since. So the sooner now we accept that, we can move on with this whole thing, and you can get your marriage back on track, even though it's just started. So on and so forth.
Priorities.
Yes.
Yeah, I must say you've animated me now. Now I want to go watch it again tonight, for Christ's sake. I'm ashamed to say. I mean, no, you know what? To hell with that. I'm actually proud to say I've watched The Matrix Reloaded so many times. It must be. I must have watched it at least 20 times at this point. I absolutely love it. I think it's phenomenal. And
when
some of the things.
Cinema, I've seen it 5 times in the cinema. That's the most.
Did not.
Yeah, that's the most I've ever seen anything in the cinema.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So much so that I remember the fella who used to work in the cinema in Thurles, the old cinema, because this was 2003. Like, for I think the second. Maybe time 4 and time 5 when I went in to see it. Now this is 14-year-old me now going in to see The Matrix. Those 2 times when I went to the shop to get shite, I was given everything for free, because it was like, yeah, Jesus, you're nearly keeping this place afloat by yourself, because you just keep coming in to see the fucking Matrix Reloaded. But I just adored it. And like, I remember waiting for it to be released on DVD. And I remember those few months were painful because I loved it so much, and I was just like, ah. But yeah. Anyway, sorry, I'm putting across you there.
No, you're fine. Allow me to get us back on track. So you've just named a couple of things out loud there from Reloaded, and the thing that really stood out to me was the idea that the first Matrix is our indoctrination, and the second Matrix then is the deconstruction of that indoctrination. And I think the character we have to focus on to really get under the hood and examine that is Morpheus, because Morpheus is at the epicenter of this. He's the one who believes in his faith so fully and so totally that, in the words of the first one, that he's willing to risk his own life for it. Yeah. And it reminds me, PJ, and you know me now, I've got a real strong kind of philosophical bent. I teach it, for Christ's sake. But there's a parable that we teach in A-level philosophy, and it's called the parable of the gardener. And the parable of the gardener is just a brief story, like any parable is. 2 gentlemen happen across a clearing in the woods. But it's not like any old clearing. The clearing in the woods appears to be remarkably well maintained, almost like a garden. So one of the gentlemen comes to the conclusion that there must be a gardener. And the other one says, you know what, I'm not convinced there's a gardener. I need more evidence. And so the 2 gentlemen set about creating a kind of a system of traps and alarms that would reveal the presence of the gardener should this gardener arrive. Right? Are you with me so far?
Yep.
So, they get sniffer dogs, they set up, tripwires and things like that. And no matter how fantastical their attempts to detect the gardener become, they never detect a gardener. And every single time one of the alarms or systems to detect the gardener fails, the believer in the presence of the gardener comes up with an ad hoc explanation.
Yep.
So when the dogs fail to sniff out this gardener, the believer says, oh, it must be an odorless gardener.
Yeah, he has no scent.
He has no scent. And when the tripwires fail to trip up a gardener, oh, well, he must be non-physical. The gardener must be non-physical. And on we go on our merry way. And what this parable, which is probably extremely obvious at this point, but just for the sake of being thorough, what the parable conveys is the idea that somebody who believes something so fully and so thoroughly is not going to allow evidence to count against their belief.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're going to show against the belief. They're going to come up with some kind of an ad hoc justification to make that commensurate with the truth of their presupposition, basically. This led, I believe it was Anthony Flew, to the conclusion that religious claims, and these were his words, die the death of 1,000 qualifications, which is a quote I absolutely love. And this applies to Morpheus completely. When Neo eventually discovers that the prophecy is hogwash, and he discovers that in his conversation with the architect, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. But when he discovers that it's hogwash and he tells Morpheus, Morpheus just doesn't believe him.
Yeah, he refuses. Like, that's the other thing. That's the further mirroring of their relationship from the first one. Where in the first one, Morpheus was telling Neo that, yeah, your entire life, everything has been a simulation. It's all been a lie. And Neo is reluctant to accept this harsh reality. But Morpheus is kind of like, oh, I assure you, this is it. So he's, the liberator from this deception that the machines have inflicted upon Neo and the entire human race. And, now the script has been flipped, and it's Neo now who is presenting Morpheus with this difficult truth that you've dedicated your entire life to a fucking lie, buddy. Everything that you believed has been a load of bollocks, and you've just been manipulated from the word go.
Yeah, and Morpheus is very good at providing evidence for his own beliefs. He says at one point, I've got the quote written here, those armies will never reach the gates of Zion. What makes you so sure? Consider what we have seen, counselor. Consider that in the last 6 months, we have freed more minds than in the last 6 years. This attack is an act of desperation. Right? So he's so convinced that everything is interpreted as evidence in favor of his presupposition.
Yeah.
The idea that more minds were freed could just be evidence that the Matrix is nearing its reset point, which is what the architect reveals, which is probably what was actually going on. But of course, Morpheus misinterprets that as evidence that they're succeeding, that they're winning, and so on. And so when Neo ultimately brings the hammer down and tells him, sorry, it's not true, Morpheus refuses to accept it. And Neo says in response, but he says something along the lines of, but you said so yourself.
Yeah. So it's like, if the prophecy is true, why isn't the war over?
Yeah.
Because it should end. Neo has already been to the source. And at that point, if Morpheus's beliefs were true, the war should have just ended at that point, as was promised. But one thing that I love about this film as well is one of the scenes that is admittedly just a bad scene is that whole rave in Zion.
Yeah. I watched it recently. I watched it twice, actually, recently. Once in preparation for this conversation and another time for pleasure. And but
another time for a good wank.
But I'm afraid to say that I torture Becky. Becky, any of my long-term listeners and viewers will know Becky appeared in several episodes of my Magic School series. And Becky, unfortunately, has to go through the torturous experience of watching all these films with me when I sit down and prepare for podcasts like this. So she's watched it twice with me. And on both viewings, she said something along the lines of, what's with the 10-minute orgy scene? Like, what's going on there? It's so out of place.
Yeah,
it could really easily have been cut out. It's a ridiculous scene. It's just completely unnecessary.
I couldn't agree more. It is a fucking and it destroys the pacing as well, because like the whole plot progression grinds to a halt for all of that time, and for no good reason. Like, I mean, there's some extended action sequences, but at least you're getting like some class action set piece, whereas in this you're just what the fuck am I meant to be thinking now? I don't know. But where I was going with that is right before that scene kicks off and the speech that Morpheus gives to the crowd, I like, now maybe I don't think I'm reading into this at all. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, I suppose, or self-evident even. But the whole speech that Morpheus gives, and he basically is preaching his beliefs to the crowd, and this is why you shouldn't be terrified in the face of certain death. I think there's a great commentary on why we believe, when we do believe. So basically, you're presenting all these people in this cave with this scenario that, hey, we all know there's a load of machines coming here with the intent to butcher every one of us, but wouldn't it be better to think that, no, it'll be fine? So it's not a case that these people necessarily, because before that we've been given enough reason to think that as many people doubt Morpheus as they do believe him. But now it seems that the cave, everyone buys it. Everyone drinks the Kool-Aid and goes, yeah, let's have a session. Well, hey. Yeah. And it's this perfect kind of a thing where it demonstrates like that religion is the opiate of the masses, because here we see the masses who should be terrified for their fucking lives, all drinking the Kool-Aid and going, fuck it, let's just have a rave. The machines will never get here. Yeah, Morpheus is right. Yeah. So it's an utter denial and dismissal of reality. And that's kind of the observation that's being made by the Wachowskis about religious faith, and one that I happen to agree with myself.
Yeah, and I've got another parable for you, if you'll permit me. There's another parable called...
No, I won't.
No, fuck off, it's your parables.
Yeah, I won't permit you to do that on your podcast.
So this parable is called the parable of the celestial city, and it's exactly the point you just made.
Yeah.
So the parable of the celestial city, a lot like the parable of the gardener, is two gentlemen walking along a road. However, one of them believes that at the end of this journey, there is a celestial city where all the wrongs will be righted and things will be glorious and all the rest of it. Essentially a metaphor for heaven. The other man walking next to him thinks that the road has no meaningful end, and that at a certain point of the journey, he'll just die and that's it. And what the parable conveys is the idea that as the person who believes in the celestial city is walking along and they encounter a pothole, or they encounter a trial or a tribulation or some kind of struggle, they interpret all of those struggles, no matter how miserable they are, they interpret those struggles and trials and tribulations as tests on their way to the celestial city. So in a way, religious faith can have enormous utility, to say nothing about whether or not its truth claims are relevant or valid. Even if it's all bollocks, if it's all untrue, which I suspect it is as an atheist, no doubt. But even if it's all untrue, it can still have utility. And utility that I've acknowledged on this channel. I spoke about when my grandmother passed away, and I felt jealous about the fact that people standing around me were filled with a sense of hope, because in their view, Nana was just in heaven. And I was filled with the dread of nihilism and the meaninglessness of the fact that she's gone and I'll never see her again and it's game over.
Yeah.
And so it can have utility.
Yeah, I've also been there. Like, I mean, I've actually on your podcast as well, I actually told you the story about before being in such a bad state and knowing full well that rationally I don't believe any of these things, but actually wanting to try and indoctrinate myself to actually willingly drink the Kool-Aid to make the patterns of thinking that I was stuck in stop. Anything to make it fucking, So it's not a case that people actually believe these fucking things. They're just want to be free of the terror of the unknown for a time.
You're kind of like one of the people in the cave in that story, right?
Yeah.
You might not fully believe Morpheus, but fuck it, if it takes the edge off, let's just go with it. Now, not to say that one can choose their beliefs, because I'm not convinced by that either, but you could certainly become convinced of something for emotional reasons. And I think that's what happens to a lot of people in the cave in that moment, albeit it's not clear what the breakdown of skepticism versus belief is in Zion. We're just made aware that there are certainly certain notable figures who are skeptical of the claims and whatnot. But yeah, I think you're you're spot on. I think that is what the Wachowskis were going for in the second film. They were trying to demonstrate how faith, while it can be comforting, can in fact be a fool's errand, and it can blow up in your face.
What Morpheus is essentially in that scene is he's one of those guys, you know, the lads that be preaching and they be fucking, oh, praise the Lord kind of jobby, the fucking, Joe, those really animated fucking religious guys you see on TV preaching X, Y, and Z, and
a televangelist.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's essentially one of those.
Yes,
that's what he is. But because we're still, you know, you see it largely shot from behind Morpheus's back, so we're still kind of on Morpheus's side. We're still we're still there with him, and we're like, yeah, great. It's good that this is true because we've seen the first movie. We've seen all those events,
and
maybe
know.
all the people, maybe all the people in the cave, you know, had they seen the things that we see, and they'd believe as well. But it's like, fuck, no.
And then it's all bullshit. And Morpheus is revealed to be a false prophet who honestly believed, but a false prophet nonetheless. And not only a false prophet, but a tool of the machines themselves, relying on our innate irrationality and our kind of tendency to fall hook, line, and sinker for stories that place us at the epicenter in terms of importance.
Our willingness to believe absolute bollocks.
Well, our willingness to believe bollocks that serves us in the end. Do you see what I'm saying? It's not like human beings are going around necessarily willing to just believe any old nonsense because that nonsense doesn't necessarily serve you, but we're certainly willing to buy into heaven because heaven is a lovely idea and it'll all be great. And not even all Christians and religious people buy into a literal notion of hell. Hell is just absence from God. So they've even, you know, dusted that off and made it more comfortable. And I feel like that's going on in the Matrix. People want to believe that this is true because, wouldn't it be lovely if the machines aren't going to come and kill us all? It's arguably a cynical point they're making that we're willing to believe things that are self-serving almost.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, I can't see any other reason why we would adopt such irrational claims. Like, I think the cherry on the cake in terms of that scene, the thing that I just cap it off with lovely is say Morpheus gets his name from the Greek god of dreams. Morpheus is, so that's where the character gets his name from. And then right at the end, after all that rave business is done, we see all the lights getting shut out on all the various levels of Zion, yeah. And Morpheus then just comes out with, was it a good night, Zion? Sweet dreams. And it's like,
yes,
perfect. There you go. The masses have been given their opiate, and now off to Betty Boys now, and it's a sound night's sleep with you. Don't worry, impending doom will be fine. Don't worry about it. It'll be grand. And it's just like, okay. And at that point in the film, you're still along for the ride, and you're like, oh, grand, yeah, fine. Thank God for, you know, Morpheus and Neo and, you know, the prophecy. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm really just reeling. I'm reeling in that kind of observation you made about how the first film sets us up only for the second film to knock us down, because you're right. You made a wonderful observation there about the camera work and how much of that speech that Morpheus gives to the crowd is shot from behind, because we are both in spirit and literally behind Morpheus. In that moment. And that's such a wonderful observation. That's a thought that hadn't occurred to me before, but you're absolutely spot on.
Because we've seen all of his claims validated up until this point.
Yes.
So, you know, brilliant.
I think you're right. And what I love about Reloaded is before it reveals the truth, which again I want to get to with the speech of the architect, before it reveals that truth, it peppers in little hints of the truth that's going to be revealed to us. Little things that I caught only in a recent viewing, lines that didn't quite make sense to me before, but now they do. So there's a great moment at the start where Neo has the fight with the three agents at the meeting in the Matrix. And after the fight ends and Agent Smith shows up and he talks to himself because he's making copies of himself. He says it's happening exactly as before. And he goes, well, not exactly. Yeah, because of course he's the difference. But that's a hint at
The
the
anomaly
previous.
now, yeah.
He's the anomaly, yes, but that's the hint at the previous several iterations of the Matrix.
Yeah.
And we don't know that yet, of course, as viewers. And there's another hint, and I don't know how I didn't notice this, and with subsequent viewings. And I've known it for a while, but I had watched the film many dozens of times before I noticed that the Merovingian speech was actually a huge hint. And what the Merovingian says is, and I've written down a couple of notes here. He says, "Why are you here?" to Morpheus, Neo, and Trinity.
Yeah.
And Neo says, "You know the answer to that question." And Merovingian says, "But do you? You think you do, but you do not. You are here because you were sent here. You were told to come here, and you obeyed. It is, of course, the way of all things. You see, there is only one constant, one universal. It is the only real truth. Causality.
Yeah.
Action, reaction, cause and effect." And then Morpheus says, which so typifies and actually wraps a wonderful bow around that conversation about Morpheus. Morpheus says in response, everything begins
with choice. Yeah.
Yes, everything begins with choice. And the Merovingian says, no, wrong. Choice is an illusion created between those with power and those without. Merovingian is talking about the machines there.
Yep.
He is a machine.
Yep.
He's talking about the fact that he's saying to them, I know why you're here. You're here because we're manipulating you. You're here because we have created a faith for you, which you have taken hook, line, and sinker. You think it's a choice, but it's not. This faith has been constructed in such a manner that we know that irrational human minds are going to accept it.
The Smith encounter happens before that, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct. Yeah, that's right.
But the whole thing that Smith basically proposes to Neo before the fight kicks off is this whole idea of purpose. So the whole line that he comes out with is the whole thing: we are not here because we are free. We are here because we are not free. There's no escaping reason, no denying purpose. Because as we both know, without purpose, we would not exist. So basically, once we get as far as the Merovingian's place, he's basically kind of stating that you're here because of your purpose. Your purpose is to reset this iteration of the Matrix and bring everything back to zero. And, so
we can start again.
Yeah. So the cycle continues anew, and, business as usual for the machines. The machines get to keep on harvesting the humans and, all that kind of jazz. So he's basically echoing back that, you think you've chose to be here and you're on some fucking crusade to save humanity, but no, you're here because of the purpose that we gave you.
Yeah, you're puppets on strings.
Yeah, Neo, your purpose is to reset this whole thing. Morpheus, your purpose was to drink the Kool-Aid and to fucking set everything in place for this whole Messiah jazz to entertain your people long enough to facilitate the one doing what he needs to do to start this whole cycle again. And you, all the while, you think you're here by choice, and you think that you're of some kind of consequence, and that you are outside of the network of control where you're actually perpetuating it.
Yeah. You put it quite well before. The machines have taken into account raging against the machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are in fact counting on it, as you put it. And you're absolutely spot on. But I just love how on the nose the Merovingian speech is. And yet, if you don't know the truth of what's going on, the speech is elusive and mysterious. He's telling them everything without telling them anything.
The thing
it's
about
beautifully
it is,
written. It's beautifully written.
Yeah. The thing about it is, though, he is so blatant with the actual truth that he's presenting them. He's blatantly telling them, you are all being made cunts out of, basically.
Yeah.
You are being manipulated into doing what you are doing for the betterment of someone else's agenda, and you don't even know it. But they are all so hopelessly indoctrinated into Morpheus's cult of the Oracle and the Messiah and the One, all that jazz, that they are just blatantly ignoring it. But he's actually, he's pulling no punches. He's telling them straight up but they're just kind of just dismissing it as, oh, he's just some pompous machine program who just wants power and wealth and control, and he's probably just trying to baffle us with bullshit because that's who he is. So they're just like not receptive to the truth that he's laying out in front of them. Even after the fight in the chateau sequence, that whole kind of thing, he even says to Neo, "Mark my words, boy, mark them well. I have survived your predecessors, and I will survive you."
Yeah,
so
telling him directly.
He's like, at no point is he ever being coy. He is just hurling the information at them. He's going, "You're all been taken for a ride, like, and you're so fucking," but they're just hopelessly indoctrinated to the point that they're not even going to take into account that there might be something to what he's saying.
My interpretation of the Merovingian's character is that he is the personification of atheism. The Merovingian is the personification of atheism. And it's not that, just to be clear about what it isn't saying, I don't think that the Wachowskis are trying to tell us that atheists are pompous and arrogant. I think what they're doing, and they're doing it very on the nose, is creating a personified version of how the faithful, like Morpheus, Neo, and Trinity, view the naysayers.
Yeah.
And so they have to make the Merovingian an antagonistic, pompous character, because that's exactly how the faithful see those who disregard their claims or fail to take them seriously.
Just mean-spirited bastards, basically.
Yes, they see people like me, frankly, as just trying to, piss in everybody's cornflakes. Oh, well, why can't you just let people believe their silliness? Well, I've dedicated hours and hours and hours of my podcast time to explaining why it's not a good idea to just live and let live when it comes to dangerous ideas. But the Merovingian is that personification of the guy who actually has the right answer and is telling the faithful right in front of them, laying it out. This is where your belief system is flawed. You have dedicated your life, in the words of Daniel Dennett, you have dedicated your life to a folly.
Yeah, this extremely unpleasant man, is actually the only one who has been honest with you. Say what you like about him, but he's actually been the only one that's been telling you the truth up until this point.
And you know what? You're absolutely right there, because, and this is something that really irritates me. Even if an atheist was unpleasant and distasteful and arrogant and pompous, that's actually irrelevant. Because if a pompous and arrogant person told me the evidence for something and the evidence stacked up, I would be obliged as an empiricist to believe it, regardless of how pompous and unpleasant the person was. I feel like it's kind of like low expectations on the faithful. And if you are listening to this, dear listener, and you are religious, please push back against that, because
stop it.
There are people who speak on behalf of the religious as though they're made out of paper mache. So I don't know if Brian will listen to this conversation, but Brian has appeared in the podcast numerous times. And I have to say this, and I know Brian isn't here to defend himself, so I won't say too much. And I'll undoubtedly have Brian on again, and Brian can defend himself if he feels the need to. But I feel like Brian commits this mistake quite frequently. He defends the faithful in a way that, don't be mean to them. Don't take their faith from them. Don't be negative, and why can't we just live and let live? And he always says, first, do no harm. And I agree with doing no harm, but you see, I'm of the view that relinquishing someone from these beliefs could actually do them some good, not necessarily do them harm, albeit there are risks, but there are also risks for being in a religion. And so we can play that both ways. But we need to get out of the business of pretending that religious people just can't be told the truth. There's a subsection in any group who can't be told the truth. Right. There are people who are very sensitive about what they believe, and those people can exist in any domain. But maybe I'm naive, but I suspect most religious people are capable of having a reasonable conversation. And you know what? Potentially changing their mind. I changed my mind. I was extremely religious at one point. If I can get out of it, anybody bloody can. Right. I feel like the Wachowskis did such a great job of conveying that this pompous, and you said, well, how did you describe him? Extremely unpleasant man.
Yeah.
I think they do such a good job of kind of personifying how the faithful view atheists and atheism, and yet he's the one who's telling them the truth, and they just can't see the wood for the trees.
another thing that is a very subtle inversion of what was laid down in the first movie is remember the scene with the woman in the red dress
Yes.
where Morpheus is basically saying to Neo about, those who are still wired to the system. And he's basically saying many of them are so hopelessly inert and so dependent on the system that they will fight to protect it
Absolutely.
without realizing that he is guilty of exactly the same thing.
Yes.
His worldview states that, well, I'm the only one that knows the truth here. So he is the one who is so hopelessly inert and dependent on his system of belief that even though this man, this albeit extremely unpleasant man, is hurling the truth at them.
Yes.
They're just having none of it.
And he can't see it because he is as guilty of the people connected to the Matrix.
Absolutely. He's an
indoctrination
in a different system. Granted, he's no longer stuck in the Matrix simulation.
But he is, though. He is. That's what I love about the film. Because the humans in the real world are as much a part of the Matrix as the humans who are in the Matrix. They are equally under the control of the machines.
Well, yeah, I suppose, like, what I mean is the system of control, like, he's in the grip of another system of control, but he thinks because he was liberated from one particular part of it that he's free and everything is all his own agency, and he even states that everything begins with choice. He is very much of the belief that that he does possess free will, and that him and humanity, all they need to do is believe and follow the path, and everything will be grand.
Even the word liberated doesn't work, though, because the people who are taken out of the Matrix are not liberated, inverted commas. They are put in another system of control. Nobody is free. That's what's so beautiful about the whole narrative. The human beings outside the Matrix and the human beings in the Matrix are all under the control of the same thing, the machines. It's just that in the Matrix, they are quite literally plugged in to a fake reality. Outside the Matrix, the machines plug a fake reality, metaphorically speaking, into the brains of those human beings, and that is religion. And it's absolutely bloody brilliant. It is brilliant. And you're spot on with your observation that Morpheus is as guilty of being hoodwinked and being unable to see the wood for the trees as those who are connected to the Matrix are. Yeah. They're directly analogous.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, PJ, that brings us to the architect speech, if you're ready for that.
Yeah.
So the penultimate kind of scene in the film is Neo finally discovering the truth that the prophecy is bullshit, but it's revealed in what is arguably one of the most confusing speeches in all of cinema history.
Yeah, a lot of people seem to really have that kind of, I say gripe.
I don't think it's not a gripe for me. I love it. I love the intricacy. I love the complexity.
I love it too. I mean, he speaks like what I would imagine a machine
would speak like.
A machine would speak like, yeah.
He speaks like a dictionary. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that said, I love it, but I'd be lying to you if I said I grasped it on a first viewing. I'd be lying to you if I said I grasped it on the seventh bloody viewing. It took me a long time to digest what was actually being said by the architect. And now that I am 30 years of age and I'm sitting here with one of my best mates in the world, I can't wait to discuss this and figure it all out, not least because I know there's going to be a lot of viewers who will listen to this section and get some clarification in terms of what was actually being said in the architect scene. So if you're ready to proceed, PJ, I'm just going to read the script here and we're going to dissect it piece by piece.
Cool.
Awesome. So Neo walks through the door and the architect says, "Hello, Neo." "Neo, who are you?" "Architect, I am the architect. I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you. You have many questions, and though the process has altered your consciousness, you remain irrevocably human. Ergo, some of my answers you will understand, and some of them you will not. Concordantly, while your first question may be the most pertinent, you may or may not realize it is also the most irrelevant." Neo says, do you remember?
Why am I here?
Why am I here? Yes.
Yeah.
And so the architect says, and here's where we get into the nitty gritty, PJ, and here's where we're going to have to put our thinking caps on. So the architect says, your life is the sum of a remainder of an unbalanced equation inherent to the programming of the matrix. I think there's already enough to talk about right there. Correct me if I'm wrong, PJ. That is a reference back to the speech that Smith gives in the first film, where he points out that our primitive cerebrum kept trying to wake up from the programming of the Matrix because they created a perfect reality for us, right?
Yeah, we couldn't accept it as being real because we're not wired for a perfect reality.
Yes. So then they attempted with a second matrix and created a matrix with imperfections. So that's what the architect is referring to there, in case anybody is wondering. When he says that the one is the sum of a remainder of an unbalanced equation inherent to the programming of the matrix, what he's talking about is that there's going to be X amount of humans who reject it, and we need this other prophecy to control the humans who are outside it. But let's keep going for the moment, and we'll get there. You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincerest efforts, I have been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision. While it remains a burden, I can't say this word, assiduously avoided, I believe, it is not unexpected and thus not beyond a measure of control, which has led you inexorably to here. So essentially what he's saying there, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, PJ, even though it's difficult to avoid this problem of control, it can be catered for, which is why the very reason why you're here right now, because you are a victim of this system of control that we have created.
Yeah, whilst basically what he's saying is, we couldn't get rid of the anomaly itself, so we just created a system around the anomaly to control the anomaly.
Yes, a secondary system, a fallback, essentially. Yeah. Yes. Oh, man, I love this. This is so great. Neo says, you haven't answered my question. And then the architect says, quite right. Interesting. That was quicker than the others. And then Neo's many other previous iterations in the TVs behind him, it shows, that's what those TVs are in my estimation. It shows the previous answers of the one.
What I always thought, because it's not clear, if every one that came before, looked identical to Neo. So what I always assumed was, and I don't know, this is all kind of, you kind of have to just kind of speculate this shit because we're never really given answers. But what I always kind of thought was that all of those screens were displaying a computation that would basically show back every possible response, that every way that Neo could possibly respond to what's being said.
Perhaps, yeah. Again, it's speculative. I'm not sure. In any case, the architect follows up and says, the matrix is older than you know. I prefer counting from the emergence of one integral anomaly to the emergence of the next, in which case this is the sixth version. So this is the bombshell that's about to be dropped on Neo, where it's revealed that the matrix is far older than he knows, and that there have actually been 6 versions, including this one, where human beings who left the matrix have been controlled with a prophecy, and then they are eventually killed, and then more humans who reject the program are put into that same prophecy or fed that same prophecy to control them outside the matrix just as much as those inside the matrix are being controlled. So what the architect says, or what Neo says rather to the architect in response to that, is either no one told me or no one knows.
Precisely.
Well done. And he says, as you are undoubtedly gathering, the anomaly is systemic, creating fluctuations in even the most simplistic equations. Neo then correctly points out, choice. The problem is choice.
Yeah.
And then the architect follows up, which is really a clarification of some of the revelations that Agent Smith gives us in the first film. The architect says, the first Matrix I designed was quite naturally perfect. It was a work of art, flawless, sublime, and triumphed equally only by its monumental failure.
Yeah.
The inevitability of its doom is as apparent to me now as a consequence of the imperfection inherent in every human being. Thus, I redesigned it based on your history to more accurately reflect the varying grotesqueries of your nature.
Yeah.
I
He clicks the button on
absolutely
the
love
pen, and all the fucking screens they start
Yes,
showing
Adolf
like,
Hitler and the Gulag and all the rest of it.
Vietnam, fucking lads getting fucking flamethrowered and all manner of
Ah,
fucking
Jesus
shit.
Christ, yeah. But it's perfect because it's exactly what Agent Smith said, that the first Matrix didn't work. We kept waking up from it because it was perfect. So the architect redesigned it with the imperfections intact. But then what's very interesting, he says, and I quote, however, I was again frustrated by failure. I have since come to understand that the answer eluded me because it required a lesser mind, or perhaps a mind less bound by the parameters of perfection. Thus, the answer was stumbled upon by another, an intuitive program, initially created to investigate certain aspects of the human psyche. If I am the father of the Matrix, she would undoubtedly be its mother. Neo says the Oracle. So it was the Oracle who realized that they needed to give human beings a choice.
Or rather, the illusion of choice.
Or rather, the illusion of choice. Yes. So what it says here, the architect says, please, as I was saying, she stumbled upon a solution whereby nearly 99% of all test subjects accepted the program, as long as they were given a choice, even if they were only aware of the choice at a near unconscious level. Now, that's what I wanted to speak to you about, PJ, briefly. Am I correct in assuming that that seems to intimate the idea that when human beings are born or grown in the fields of the Matrix, that they essentially give the goo goo gaga baby some kind of subliminal programming choice about whether they go left or right, essentially, whether they go left towards the Matrix or right towards the real world, quote unquote. Am I insane when I say that, or does that make sense? Like, in what sense are we being given a subliminal? Because they don't clarify, of course, and we're well in the realm of speculative thinking here. But I just want to get your reaction to that. What do you think he means when he says that we get a choice at a near unconscious level? At what point are we getting this near unconscious choice? Is it when we're born?
Well, I think it's kind of like, my interpretation of it has always been that it is much like how we speak about or how we debate free will in the real world, in the sense that you are under the impression that you're in the driver's seat, that you have agency and all that jazz.
Yeah.
And to me, what was being said in that scene was that this simulated reality had to support that illusion. So basically, the reality had to cater for there being enough wiggle room to allow whatever human to believe that they had some degree of agency within this world, and that the world had to cater for that, essentially.
But he's not talking about within the Matrix here. He's talking about that once we give people a choice, 99% of people accepted it. And the ones that didn't become the people outside the Matrix, right? So maybe what he's talking about is the prophecy. You know, once we gave the people who are struggling with this reality the ability to wake up, and hence we send out Morpheus and his ragtag group of misfits, that maybe that's what he's talking about there. And does that make sense?
Yeah, maybe so.
Let me read it one more time, because I think it's important, again, for the people who will be listening to this to get clarification. All we can do is theorize, because the script doesn't give all the answers, and the trilogy in total doesn't give all the answers. But he says, as I was saying, she stumbled upon a solution whereby nearly 99% of all test subjects accepted the program, as long as they were given a choice, even if they were only aware of the choice at a near unconscious level. While this answer functioned, it was obviously fundamentally flawed, thus creating the otherwise contradictory systemic anomaly that, if left unchecked, might threaten the system itself. Ergo, those that refused the program while a minority, if unchecked, would constitute an escalating probability of disaster. So he is talking about the people who wake up.
Yeah, so it would seem.
So he's talking about the prophecy. In other words, inherent in the programming of the Matrix is the possibility for someone from within the Matrix to wake up if their near unconscious mind feels the desire that it needs to wake up because it's not quite living in the real world, which is kind of how Trinity describes it to Neo in the first film. She says, "I know that feeling, Neo. I know what it's like. I know what's down that road where you go back to your lonely apartment and, you know, you wake up every day feeling like something isn't quite right, basically." So is Neo just an example of one of these humans, the 1%, who is not fully accepting the program, and so that makes him receptive to be woken up out of the Matrix by Morpheus and crew. Does that sound? Does that sound right?
Yeah, it would seem that like people had to be given the capacity to wake up, but the vast majority of people, it would seem, were willing to accept the simulation.
Yes, the vast majority of people, once they're given that psychological unconscious, albeit unconscious, once they're given the psychological possibility of waking up from it, 99% of people will just accept it.
Yeah, because presumably, like, they could hardwire something into all of the humans in the pods, basically, that, I don't know, maybe inhibits their ability to question the nature of their reality. And maybe that just flat out didn't work. So maybe the capacity to see through the looking glass, as it were, and to kind of go, you know what, there's something not quite right about this, that had to be left there. And
once that capacity was left there, 99% of human beings accepted the program.
Yeah. Once they felt of their own agency, they were like, no, sure, this is my life. Yeah, grand.
Yeah. I think we figured it out.
Yep,
and
there we go.
Neo says, figured out, lads, thanks for coming.
Next time.
Next time, AIDS in Africa. We'll figure that out next.
Jot that down in the book of solutions.
Neo says in response to this is about Zion. Architect says, you are here because Zion is about to be destroyed, its every living inhabitant terminated, its entire existence eradicated. And then Neo says, bullshit. The architect says, denial is the most predictable of all human responses, but rest assured, this will be the 6th time we have destroyed it, and we have become exceedingly efficient at it. So in other words, because the machines, in order to get 99% of people to accept the program, have had to introduce this element which is going to allow 1% of people to wake up. If 1% of people keep waking up year in, year out, year in, year out, eventually the number of humans that are alive and awake and outside the Matrix becomes too many, that becomes a threat.
Yeah, they could potentially threaten the machine's setup, basically.
Yeah, and so the machines know that this anomaly needs to be resolved every number of years. I don't know what. It doesn't clarify how long each Matrix has been around, but given the age of some of the inhabitants of Zion, I'm assuming that each integral anomaly, as he puts it, is maybe 100 years, maybe 90 years, 80 years, something like that.
It's about 100 years, because remember in Morpheus says, it was like, even Morpheus is giving his speech. I said, I'm not here because of the path that lays before me, but because of the path that lays behind me. For 100 years, we have fought these.
Yes, you're right. You're
For
right.
100 years, they have sent their armies to destroy us. That jazz. So about 100 years.
And after 100 years, I remember that which matters most.
Yeah, we are still here.
We are still here.
Yeah.
Such a great speech.
Yeah, and then upon getting the revelation that we get, it's kind of like, actually now we know that even though you were deceived as well, you were still in practice the greatest charlatan ever going,
Yeah, absolutely. Unknowingly.
Yeah, unknowingly, but still you were convincing people of something that wasn't representative of reality. So,
So then we get to the next part. The architect says, the function of the one is now to return to the source, allowing a temporary dissemination of the code you carry, reinserting the prime program, after which you will be required to select from the matrix 23 individuals, 16 females, 7 male. To rebuild Zion. Some crack to be them, lads. Failure. I like those maths.
Yeah.
Failure to comply with this process will result in a
cats who got the cream.
Failure to comply with this.
Maybe they didn't. Maybe Neo just to be a spiteful prick, or maybe because it's Neo that picks him. Maybe if the one was a spiteful bastard,
he chooses 7 fat lads.
Yeah. I'm going to pick the most pig ignorant looking people go on here now, and fucking there you go, fucking repopulate the world. Fair play to you.
Our Keanu will repopulate the world one woman at a time. I'll do that. I'll sacrifice. I'm a humanitarian.
My name is the Lord.
Amen. So, Jesus Christ, I'll never get through this. Failure to comply with this process will result in a cataclysmic system crash, killing everyone connected to the Matrix, which, coupled with the extermination of Zion, will ultimately result in the extinction of the entire human race. Now, this doesn't make sense to me. I've said this to you before, and I want to hash this out a small bit. So, in other words, the architect offers Neo a choice. He says, if you go through one door, you can go save Trinity. Great. Happy days. If you go through the other door, it'll lead back to the source. In other words, back to the machine city, where he'll be reinserted into the Matrix, and Zion will be eradicated, and he will select 23 individuals to begin the whole process again, another 100-year Matrix cycle, right? But Neo doesn't go through the door back to the source. He chooses love. He goes and saves Trinity, and yet it doesn't result in what the architect says will be a cataclysmic system crash, killing everyone connected to the Matrix. Because I thought in the film, when I first saw it, oh my God, he's going to go save Trinity. He's going to save her, and everybody connected to the Matrix is going to die. I can't believe he did that. I thought he was going to make the noble sacrifice, and Trinity was going to die, and he was going to go save the rest of humanity. But he didn't, and he saved Trinity, and yet it doesn't result in this alleged cataclysmic system crash. So can you explain that to me, PJ? What is your understanding? Why doesn't the cataclysmic system crash happen? And when was it going to happen if it didn't happen straight away? What's going on there?
All right. Hang on there now a minute for a second. I have a little bit
I can read it again. I can read it again. So
yeah, go on.
So the architect says, maybe I'll read on a little bit just so that we can get the choice element here, right?
Yeah.
So he says, the function of the one is to return to the source, allowing a temporary dissemination of the code you carry, reinserting the prime program. So he's just talking about a reset of the matrix, right?
Yep.
After which you will be required to select from the matrix 23 individuals, blah, 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 blah. We've read all that. Fine. Failure to comply with this process will result in a cataclysmic system crash, killing everyone connected to the matrix, which, coupled with the extermination of Zion, will ultimately result in the extinction of the entire human race. Now, Neo follows up and says, you won't let it happen. You can't. You need human beings to survive, to which the architect says, there are levels of survival we are prepared to accept. However, the relevant issue is whether or not you are ready to accept the responsibility of the death of every human being on this world. It is interesting reading your reactions. Your 5 predecessors were by design based on a similar predication, a contingent affirmation that was meant to create a profound attachment to the rest of your species, facilitating the function of the one. While the others experience this in a very general way, your experience is far more specific, vis-a-vis love. And that's when Trinity is introduced. Architect, apropos, she entered the Matrix to save your life at the cost of her own. Neo, no. Architect, which brings us at last to the moment of truth, wherein the fundamental flaw is ultimately expressed and the anomaly revealed as both beginning and end. There are 2 doors. The door to your right leads to the source and the salvation of Zion. The door to your left leads back to the Matrix, to her, and to the end of your species. As you adequately put, the problem is choice. But we already know what you are going to do, don't we? Already I can see the chain reaction, the chemical precursors that signal the onset of an emotion designed specifically to overwhelm logic and reason, an emotion that is already blinding you from the simple and obvious truth. She is going to die and there is nothing you can do to stop it. Architect, as Neo walks towards the door to save Trinity, hope. It is the quintessential human delusion, simultaneously the source of your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. Neo, if I were you, I would hope that we don't meet again. Architect, we won't. So that's the scene in full, but now that I've read it, what's going on there? I mean, Neo goes through the door to save Trinity, and if you haven't seen the movie, spoiler alert, he does. He saves her. But it doesn't lead to the death of everybody connected to the Matrix. The film just continues as is, and then we get the third one, and everybody's still connected to the Matrix. The battle at Zion happens, and nobody connected to the Matrix is dying. Is this just bad writing, or have we missed something?
Well, he goes on to say that the one was designed to have a profound attachment to the rest of his species, essentially.
Yes, but Neo doesn't.
Neo doesn't.
He's more attached to Trinity.
Yeah, so that's what's going to create this whole element of choice here. Although, as even the architect points out, that it isn't a choice at all. He knows ever before he asks him the question what he's going to do, because the Matrix seems to whatever about, the free will debate is still ongoing. So whatever the story, anyways, in the Matrix universe, free will seems to be out. That doesn't exist in the Matrix universe. So basically, I guess what's going on there is that, say, every other iteration of the one, upon the architect threatening the entire species with extinction if he doesn't go through that door, that was enough for the one to go shit, because he had the profound attachment to the rest of his species. But the architect, now he knows, oh shit, no, this guy, he's probably going to run off and save his girlfriend because he's stone mad about her. So
you think the threat is bullshit?
Yeah, maybe the threat was.
Is that what we're meant to get from it?
Yeah, it sounds to me like the threat to humanity was meant to work in tandem with this thing that's already been programmed into the one, to go through that door no matter what and save your species, because the mere threat to them alone is enough reason for you to do it. But Neo, in this case, has a deeper attachment to Trinity, so he's not going to do it.
Yeah, it leaves open the question. I struggle to buy the idea that the architect is just lying to him. Maybe, and I'm trying to be charitable here in my interpretation of the writing, maybe the cataclysmic system crash is not something that's meant to happen instantaneously. Maybe the cataclysmic system crash is something that's going to happen after Zion has been destroyed, because the program isn't going to be restarted. Maybe that's going to happen in the future. But then it never gets to happen because of the events of the third film, where they actually settle it. They settled the dispute, basically, in the third film, which we can get to in another conversation. Again, I'm just trying to be charitable to the writing here, but the way it's worded, it sounds immediate in its delivery. It sounds like if he walks through that door to save Trinity, the human race is fucked. That's what it sounds like in the delivery of the dialogue. Yeah. But obviously that's not what transpires. So perhaps I'm reading into the dialogue something that isn't there, because again, I want to be charitable to the writing here, because I love the film. And at the same time, though, I want to be honest and not give the film a free pass if it doesn't deserve it. But I guess there's wiggle room there to say that the cataclysmic system crash is projected to happen after Zion has been destroyed.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think it is necessarily meant to be an instantaneous type of thing, because I think I remember there being something about, it's part of the reason that the whole thing had to go in cycles, because after a certain amount of time, people could maybe start to see the cracks in the reality or something. So if the Matrix wasn't reset every 100 odd years or something like that, it would only be a matter of time until people would realize that they're in fact living in a fucking imaginary world, basically. So
I guess it has to be reset to pull 23 people randomly out of it, because otherwise those 23 people you randomly pull out might not be ready to be taken out of the Matrix, first of all, which we see conveyed with considerable clarity in the first film, where Neo, as Morpheus delivers the dialogue, we don't free a mind that's been in there too long, and you were an edge case, but we had to because we think you're the one, basically.
Yeah.
So presumably it has to be reset to take out 23 individuals, not least because of the discordance that would produce within the Matrix reality itself. I mean, what would you have to do within the reality of the Matrix? Fake the deaths of those 23 people, or what? It just doesn't. That's not clean. So if you just reset it, I mean, they could reset it in such a manner that I just start my life in my 30s.
Yeah.
They could literally do anything with the reality.
Yeah.
They could just reset it and start my life blanked, my entire life blanked with memories pre-installed, basically. This is my reality now. A lot like a dream. You don't question the reality of a dream when you're just at the bar with your mates in a dream. You don't think to yourself in the dream, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And when you do have those thoughts, you can end up having a lucid dream, which would be the 1%. Dreaming is a huge theme in the film. Very few people can lucid dream, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I've had several lucid dreams in my life, and they're the most peculiar thing ever, because you realize that you're literally in a playground in your own head. And that is actually a perfect analogy for the Matrix, because 99% of people don't question a dream and they're in it. It's the 1% who can lucid dream. Apparently it's a rare phenomenon. Not everybody can do it. And so yeah, you'd have to reset it, wouldn't you? And 99% of people then will accept the reset, and another 1% will be released, and off we go again on our second cycle of 100 years, or in this case, our 8th cycle of 100 years.
Lucid dreaming now, that just to clarify, that's when you wake up and there's all that lucid fluid all over the place.
No, lad, no, that's another thing. I'll talk to you about that off air.
Oh, right. Well, that's the one
no worries, lad.
that I've done a few times.
Yeah, no. We'll talk about that off air, lad. No, the listeners, that wouldn't be okay to talk about that in front of the listeners now. Don't worry.
Okay.
And yeah, right. And you know what, PJ? That might be the best place to climax, if you will. I've talked to you about lots of things I wanted to talk about, but if I'm being honest, I have so many pages of notes here. This conversation could go on for another 3 hours.
Yeah.
But I think we've talked about enough of the key points that we can wrap the conversation here. That said, I do want to give you one final opportunity. If there's something you would like to address, or something that a thread that we've left hanging that you'd like to put a neat bow around, if you will.
Yeah, I guess just kind of with the whole religious symbolism kind of angle as well. I just love the aesthetic of the architect. I love how he's
yes.
this old man with a white beard. He's
Colonel
very
Sanders.
much. Yeah.
I can't get the KFC out of my mind, the connection there. But yeah, I agree with you. If it wasn't for Colonel Sanders, it would be. I wouldn't have that ridiculous connotation, but I agree with you. I love the aesthetic of the architect as well. It's perfect.
Yeah, there's something about like this classical conceptualization of God that he seems to fit, and he's very much analogous to God in this universe. And Neo, who we spoke about already, who is very reluctant, or had been very reluctant at least, to accept the idea of fate as he puts it in the first movie, because he doesn't like the idea that he's not in control of his own life.
Yeah.
But now, God himself is sitting in front of him and he's telling him, no, it's real.
You're under control.
Yeah. You are, as what Smith said. And the religious kind of symbolism in it is fucking fantastic. Smith, now what I think of it like, Smith, who was formerly an agent of the system, through Neo's actions, the protector of the Matrix, one of the agents of the system, Smith, falls from grace. So he is essentially a fallen angel, and he embodies the whole Antichrist thing, and he's the literal personification of nihilism. Whilst Neo retains the whole Jesus thing. The architect is undoubtedly God in this scenario. I have an awful horn for the whole religious symbolism going on in it. I love that shit.
I love it as well. I love it. And there's no doubt in this conversation that it's possible to read one's own philosophical commitments into the script.
Yes.
There's no question about that. And so there might be things that I read into the script, or you've read into the script, that the Wachowskis were not intending at all.
There's probably a way that you could interpret the entire movie as a defense of faith.
Perhaps so. Absolutely. Because even though Commander Locke is literally correct about the prophecy being flawed, the prophecy still comes true in another way. The machines didn't destroy Zion in the end. So one could argue that the prophecy was correct. It was just correct in a different way. And so, yeah, you could absolutely read the film as a defense of faith. And so, look, I don't know. It's a fascinating one. What I would love is for some of the listeners to jump into the comments below and tell us their interpretations and whether or not they agree with you and I, PJ, because what I want most out of this is more conversations like the one we just had.
Yeah.
And speaking of which, we absolutely have to do this again for the third film. And then we will get to do it a fourth time for the newest film. And let's hope in closing that isn't a crock of shit.
Yeah.
What's your prophecy?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, man, I swear. If it's bad, you know what? If it's bad, I will be upset. I'm not going to lie. I will be upset if the fourth film is bad. But, I will always have the first three films, which I have to admit I really do love, and I have to echo your sentiment there. So,
Yeah.
On that note, PJ, I do have to bring it to an end. We're coming up here on 2 hours. By the time it's edited down, this will maybe closer to an hour and a half or something. But I just want to make it somewhat digestible for the audience. I've said this in podcasts before, and I'm going to say it again. If you got to this point in the video, in this podcast, comment below and say I got to that point, because I'm going to give a special little heart and a comment for those people who stuck around this long to listen to us droning on.
Did anyone get that far in the last one, actually?
Several did, yes, several. I couldn't believe it. And for me, several people getting that far. I know. If they got that far, and I did, I stayed true to my word. I went down, I gave them a special little heart, and I commented and I thanked them sincerely for getting to that point in the conversation. So if you got to this point in the conversation, please don't miss an opportunity to get a special response and a heart.
There will be a cash prize.
You will be entered into a lottery.
Yeah.
No, you won't. I don't have any money to give away. I'm
just
skint.
in the comments. Just put in your bank details, your date of birth, your social security number.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And your details will be in safe hands. Don't worry about that. Yeah. Guys, honestly, if you have gotten this far, thank you very much for watching this episode of the podcast. PJ, I have to thank you again. You're a legend, and I love your channel, and I love what you're doing. And of course, as always, every time you visit the channel, I will put your details in the description below for people to check out your content, because it is well worth it. Amazingly structured and scripted, animated comedy with a very dark slant and some very interesting philosophical ideas at play there in the subtext for those listeners and viewers who are paying attention. And so, yeah, I have to give PJ's channel a shout out there. PJ, thanks very much for joining me again.
Oh, bother, lad.
And again, to you, the listener, thanks very much. And if you did like the podcast, I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. So if you do want to offer some kind of payment for the effort we've gone to here today, just drop a like in the video, because that helps me out enormously. And do jump into the comments below. I do respond to as many comments as I can. That number is starting to increase, so it's getting difficult to respond to all of them. But if you do jump into the comments, there's a good chance I'll respond to you there, and I'd love to have that dialogue. So, guys, thank you very much for watching this episode of the podcast. You have been listening to the Magic Skeptic, aka Magic Dara, and PJ from Just The Tipp, and I hope to see you in the next one. All the best. Bye-bye.